Every time you tap your card at a coffee shop, a small invisible fee disappears from what the merchant receives. You don't see it, the cashier doesn't mention it, there's no line on your receipt, but it's there every single time. It's called a swipe fee, or more formally, an interchange fee. And in 2024 alone, American merchants paid a record $187 billion of them. That number has increased 70% in just 4 years. That fee funds two of the most profitable businesses on earth. Visa's operating margin over 65%, Mastercard's over 55%. Together, they control 90% of all payment card processing on the planet outside of China. They have faced dozens of antitrust lawsuits across multiple continents, paid billions in settlements, been investigated by the US Department of Justice, the European Union, Australia, New Zealand, Poland, and the UK, and they are still growing. This is the story of how two companies built the most durable hidden fee machine in the history of modern commerce, and why, after 20 years of trying, almost nobody has been able to stop them. If you're new here, we cover stories like this every week. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one. To understand how Visa and Mastercard became what they are, you have to go back to 1958 and to one man's mistake. Bank of America was the largest bank in California, and in September of that year, they decided to launch something entirely new, a consumer credit card. They called it Bank Americard. The launch strategy was radical. Bank of America mailed 60,000 preloaded credit cards to the residents of Fresno, California, without asking any of them. No application, no credit check, no consent. They just arrived in the mail with a $60 limit attached to them. The bank called this drop marketing. It was chaos, fraudulent accounts, cards in the hands of people who had no idea what credit was, merchants who hadn't agreed to participate. Within the first year, Bank of America had lost $8.8 million on the program. But here's what the bank did next. Instead of shutting it down, they kept the losses secret. For 5 years, they quietly fixed the problems, tightened the systems, and let the card find its market. By 1961, Bank Americard was profitable. By 1966, it was generating so much money that the secret was impossible to keep. That year, the floodgates opened. Other banks wanted in. From 1960 to 1966, only 10 new credit cards had been launched in the United States. Between 1966 and 1968, 440 were introduced. Bank of America's response was to franchise the system. Pay us a $25,000 fee, they told other banks, and you can issue Bank Americards under our network. You send us a percentage of gross transactions, we'll handle the brand. It worked. Fast. Too fast. The problem was that the system had been built for one bank in one state. Now hundreds of banks across the country were issuing cards, and nobody had designed the infrastructure to handle what happened when a card issued by a bank in Chicago was used to buy something at a store in Los Angeles. The math of who owed what to whom across hundreds of institutions, across millions of transactions, was becoming catastrophically complicated. In 1968, a mid-level bank manager in the Pacific Northwest was assigned to supervise his bank's rollout of the Bank Americard program. His name was D. Hock. And what he found when he looked closely at the system was something close to controlled anarchy. The interchange process, the mechanism for banks to settle fees with each other, was in chaos. There were no universal standards. Transactions were being disputed, rejected, misrouted. The entire network was straining under weight it was never designed to bear. D. Hock convened a committee of banks to document the problems, and then, during a lunch break at a meeting with Bank of America executives, he did something unexpected. He walked up to the two Bank of America men and made them a proposal. Instead of just listing the problems, he said, what if this committee designed an entirely new way to run the whole thing? What if the card network was taken away from Bank of America entirely and turned into something owned collectively by all the banks? It took 2 years of negotiation, but in 1970, Bank of America agreed. They gave up control of Bank Americard. The issuing banks took over. They created a new independent entity called National Bank Americard Incorporated. Dee Hock became its first president and CEO. And in 1976, after expanding internationally and realizing that no foreign bank would ever voluntarily carry a card with Bank of America in the name, they gave the whole thing a new identity. Dee Hock chose the name himself, a word that meant the same thing in every language, a word that implied permission, access, arrival, Visa. Mastercard's story begins a few years earlier, and from the opposite direction. The moment Bank of America started licensing Bank Americard in 1966, a group of competing banks decided they needed their own network. That same year, a consortium of banks across California, New York, and other states formed the Interbank Card Association and launched a rival card called Mastercard. Where Visa had a single origin, Mastercard was born as a coalition, a defensive alliance of banks who saw what Bank of America was building and decided, we need our own rails. In 1979, Mastercard became Mastercard. By 1980, 2 networks controlled American card payments. They were structured differently. Visa grew from a single dominant institution, Mastercard from a consortium of rivals, but they ended up with almost identical business models. Neither company issues cards itself. Neither extends credit. They don't take on consumer debt. What they do is operate the rails, the infrastructure that connects every bank, every merchant, and every cardholder on Earth. And for every transaction that moves across those rails, they collect a fee. Here's how the machine actually works. When you buy a coffee for $5 with your Visa credit card, several things happen simultaneously that you never see. Your bank, the one that issued your card, receives what's called an interchange fee from the coffee shop's bank. That fee is typically between 1 and 3% of the transaction. On a $5 coffee, that's roughly 5 to 15 cents. Doesn't sound like much, but Visa processes over 250 billion transactions every year. At that scale, fractions of a cent become billions of dollars. The interchange fee funds the rewards points, the fraud protection, the cash back offers, all the things that make credit cards attractive to consumers. And Visa and Mastercard sit in the middle of every single one of those transactions, taking their cut. The genius of the system, and the part that critics call predatory, is the structure around it. For decades, Visa and Mastercard enforced what they called the honor all cards rule. If a merchant accepts a Visa card, they must accept all Visa cards, every type, including the premium rewards cards that carry the highest interchange fees. A small restaurant can't say, I'll take the basic Visa, but not the Sapphire Reserve with the $795 annual fee that charges me 3 times the interchange. It's all or nothing. And merchants have almost no choice but to say yes. Because telling customers you don't accept Visa means losing a substantial portion of your business overnight. This is what critics call the toll booth. Every merchant who participates in the modern economy is paying a fee to cross it. The fee is hidden in the price of everything they sell, and the toll booth operators don't compete with each other on price. The antitrust lawsuit started in 2005. Merchants, led eventually by some of the largest retailers in America, sued Visa, Mastercard, and the banks that issued their cards, alleging price fixing and anti-competitive practices. The case dragged through the courts for 20 years. In 2024, American merchants paid $187 billion in swipe fees. In November 2025, a revised settlement worth roughly $38 billion was announced, representing the largest antitrust settlement in American history. Merchant groups still called it inadequate. The European Union fined them repeatedly. Australia capped their fees. The US Department of Justice filed its own antitrust suit against Visa in September 2024. Investigations opened in New Zealand, Poland, the UK, and through all of it, Visa and Mastercard kept growing. The reason they kept growing is the same reason they were nearly impossible to stop. network effects. The more banks join the Visa network, the more merchants accept it, which means the more cardholders want it, which means more banks want to issue it. The flywheel feeds itself. By the time anyone recognized how powerful it had become, the network was already everywhere. Dee Hock built Visa to be recognized in every language and accepted by every merchant on Earth. He achieved it. The man who named it, ran it, and shaped its foundational structure left the company in 1984. He spent his later years writing and lecturing about chaotic organizations, his word for systems that blend chaos and order. He died in 2022 at the age of 93. The word he chose, the network he built, still processing $14 trillion a year. Every time you tap your card, the toll booth opens. You just don't see the gate. If this story made you look at your wallet differently, hit subscribe. We cover the hidden structures behind the world's biggest businesses every week. And check the video on screen right now for more stories like this one.